Do I regret doing my PhD? It is exactly 5 years since I had my viva and since I knew that I had achieved my goal of completing my PhD. And it was a very long sort of 3 to 4 years of doing the PhD. And yeah, I think I've just been sitting and reflecting upon it at this time of year towards the end of November thinking, do I regret doing my PhD? Okay, so I'm going to preface this by saying, no, I don't. However, there are some things about the PhD and some kind of decisions that I made during the PhD that I think I would do differently. And if you're someone who's thinking about pursuing a PhD, or you're currently in a PhD, or you're thinking about dropping out of your PhD, and you're thinking whether or not it's something that you'll regret doing if you don't complete it, then I've thought about 10 questions that I wanted to present to you and just kind of discuss. And this is quite a chatty video. I kind of just wanted to think about these questions and consider whether actually the PhD helped me with where I am today, where I could go in the future. Would I have still been able to do the same thing that I'm doing today without the PhD? Did I really need it? And whether these are things that you can consider yourself as well if you are in a bit of a sticky situation with your PhD right now too. So the first thing is, did I pursue my passion? The first question I ask is, did I pursue my passion? And I think that for me the answer is yes and no. So yes, because when I was deciding on whether I wanted to do a PhD or not, it was never a decision that I had made 10 years ago or 5 years before. It was a decision that I made as I was going along in my research journey. So I did my undergrad and I loved the idea of delving into deeper research. And so I went into a master's. And again, I thought, I haven't even touched the tip of the iceberg when it comes to research and what there is out there and what I could find and, you know, how wide the scope of research is. And so I really want to delve deeper into it, which is why I went into a PhD. But the passion of the subject itself, I wasn't really passionate about a specific subject. I know some people really want to do research in cancer research or cardiovascular research or MS research because they might have something personal related to that topic, or they lost a loved one in that specific research area, and so they're really passionate about that specific research area. For me, it wasn't anything personal, or there wasn't necessarily an area of research that I was really passionate about. I think at the time I really loved neuroscience and I was looking for a project within the neuroscience research area and I wasn't able to find one. So I think if I maybe did something more neuro related, then yes. But I think I was able to do research in any subject because I just honestly didn't mind. I just was so passionate about like biological research itself. And the second question I think that goes on from the first question is, was this research meaningful to you? And I think that one I'd probably say no, because like I said, I didn't have any personal connection with the research that I was doing. It wasn't like a passion project of mine, so it wasn't like it was meaningful in that sense. But I do know that in the long run, in 10, 20, 30 years from now, my research will hopefully be used to find a cure for cancer, or hopefully be used for clinical trials or to find some sort of therapy in the future. But because my project was based off of such a small area within the cell biology and the mechanics that I was looking at, it isn't something that can be translated directly into therapy. So it isn't it's very far-fetched, I think, from something that's quite tangible, which is why it wasn't super meaningful. But I do know that if I was maybe working on a clinical trial or something that was a lot more, I guess I can see the outcome of, then maybe it would be more meaningful to me. But I don't really care for meaning when it comes to the research I was doing, so that wasn't something that will make me regret a decision. Did I have a supportive environment? That is a massive yes. If you don't have a very good supportive environment from your peers or your supervisor or your research group or your university, that's definitely a major thing that can turn you off your PhD or make you regret even joining it. I've heard of such toxic PhD environments, and at first I struggled to believe it because mine was so positive. I was like, there's no way you can have a bad PhD lab. But actually I have realized over time that you can have quite toxic and negative environments. And this can be so detrimental to your mental health. It can really impact your research. It can really impact things outside of the research group as well. So I would really think about this quite deeply. If you're in a PhD right now and you're feeling like you're just really struggling with your environment, then that could be something that 5 years down the line you'll turn around and say, like, I should have just left it before I had even got into it too deeply. So that is definitely something to consider. Was the work-life balance adequate? I think for me, I'm gonna say yes, because I feel like I made it my passion project to make sure that I was very balanced in everything that I did. And I continued on with that when I started working after my PhD as well. So for me, it was really important that I had a good balance between work and play. And by work, I mean PhD research. And I know it's very hard. Depends on your protocol, depends on your research, depends on on so many different factors. But as much as I could, I would make sure that I did not work on weekends at all, even at home. Didn't work on weekends. I didn't work outside of I got to uni at 9 o'clock in the morning. I was quite religiously strict about that. Got in at 9 a.m. and I tried to leave at 5 p.m. as much as I could. Of course, there are times that things spill over and you have to, but I made that an exception, not a rule. And on the weekend, I only worked on the weekend towards the final year of my PhD, when I needed to come in to do a bit more work with the microscope, or when it just got really busy with the microscope for some reason. So I just decided to do it on weekends instead. But other than that, if it was not an exception, I would not work on outside of a 9 to 5. So I made that my routine. Others didn't, and that was okay, but I made that my routine. So for me, I could turn around and I could say my work-life balance was great because that was what I had set it to be, without exception. And because of that, I was able to start a YouTube channel, and I was able to start a business on the side, and I was able to do so many other things. I could go out, I could travel, I could see friends, because I made sure to have that balance. And I think this is one of those things that you'll turn around 5 years or 10 years down the line, you'll say I didn't need to work that hard. I could have just done the best I could and been as balanced as I could, and the outcome would probably have been the same. Okay, this is a big one. What are my career prospects? If you finished your PhD and you come out of it and your career prospects aren't that much better, that could be room for you to regret. Because, you're going to be well, I spent 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years in some countries, and I'm not being paid any better. I'm not in a better position. I'm not being headhunted down. Why did I do it? Was it worth it? So there are kind of two paths to this, I would say. If you want to stay in academia, then you don't really have a choice. You do need to do a PhD. Yes, you're not going to be paid much better. Yes, your job prospects are not going to be that great. But if you want to stay in academia, then you don't really have a choice. If you're leaving academia anyway, you don't necessarily need to be in a position where you have a PhD. So that could lead you to regret, because now you're 4 years older, 5 years older, and you're having to go back and start from a position that you could have 4 years ago. You haven't really gained anything. So just consider that. It is something to consider. I went into teaching after I finished my PhD, so I did a teaching/academic role. For the teaching side of things, I didn't need a PhD. So I was starting as a teacher in the same position that those with an undergrad were starting. So did I need a PhD? No, I didn't. So that's something that could lead to regret. I didn't regret it because, like I said, I will say in this video, it gave me so many other skills and opportunities that I definitely don't regret it. But it is something that you could turn around and say, I did waste my time about. So consider what your career prospects can be, and that could make a big difference. The next question that you need to think about is, did you develop any transferable skills? So these are skills that you can transfer either, obviously you can use within academia, or transfer them outside of academia. Now, I know of positions within consultancy or business or med tech, for example, where you're able to use the skills that you learned during your PhD and transfer them into a job outside of academia. That is great, because even though you didn't necessarily need your PhD, they do sometimes pay higher for PhDs, and they do value you because they know you have those analytical skills. So that's great. That means that it wasn't really wasted, that time, and you did gain something. But if you're not gaining transferable skills and your PhD isn't really giving you anything that you can take outside of academia, is it worth it? Is that something to consider, especially if you're just starting a PhD and you're not sure if you want to continue outside of your PhD, if you want to continue on in academia? Think about what skills you might be gaining from this program. If you're not going to be gaining anything that's transferable, do you think it'll be worth it? Do I value the title and the prestige? This is a funny one. Lots of people who have PhDs don't care necessarily about the doctor title, and some people find it that they want to be called doctor and they feel like it's a status thing having a PhD. I'm of mixed value. I do use my title doctor when necessary because it is something that I've earned, and I think it does mean that people do respect you slightly differently. But I didn't do a PhD for the title, so I don't expect people to say or call me doctor, and that's now something that I'm like sitting on my high horse about just because I have a PhD. That's not why I got a PhD. I could have done a medical degree, I could have done a dental degree, I could have did so many different things to get a title. If you're someone that wants to have a PhD just for the title doctor, I think you'll be disappointed and you'll definitely regret it, because firstly, most people in the outside world don't consider PhDs as doctors. And I've done loads of videos about this and people are always like, you're not a doctor. I'm like, actually. So if you're someone that wants people to call you a doctor, then this isn't really the one for you. Go and do a medical degree, you'll probably regret it. I don't think titles should give you or make you feel any better or give you a status above anybody else anyway. So if that's what you're after, you'll probably regret it. So yeah, just reflect on whether or not it's important to you. I only use my title in professional settings. Like, I won't go to buy a new sofa and they'll say, what's your title? And I'll say it's doctor. I won't use it in those kind of places, but I'll use it like at anywhere professional, and I'll use it for, like, you know, passport, things like that, just so it's associated with me professionally, but otherwise I won't use it. So just reflect on your reasons why you want the title. The next question is, was the timing right for me? And by timing, I mean, sometimes people do PhD later on in life and it's better then, because you're maybe a bit more secure in the subjects you want to study, you know kind of where your career is heading, and you know what use a PhD will be for you. But if you do it too early on, when you haven't even begun your career, you might regret it later on, because you might be like, you know what, I actually didn't need it, or actually I would have preferred to do a PhD in education than a PhD in law, for example. So just think about your career trajectory, think about sort of why you're doing it now. Could you do it later? Would you financially be in a better place if you did it at a later point? Or do you even need to do it at all? The next question is, what did I sacrifice? When we sacrifice things, we expect that something will come back to us as a return and it will be worth the sacrifice. So are we sacrificing financial freedom for 4 or 5 years? And we're hoping that we'll be paid more later. And what happens is, if you're not paid more later, you're going to regret the fact that you just spent 4 years of your life not really having a great time because you were doing a PhD. So there are so many different aspects to sacrifice that you need to think about. Are you sacrificing time with your family? You won't see your young kids for 4 or 5 years that much. And then later on, do you think you'll regret that? What are you sacrificing in that time that you're going to be pursuing a PhD? Don't just think about kind of physical things. Think about even like mental. Are you sacrificing your mental health, and like, are you sacrificing your sanity for a PhD? And is it worth it? What are you actually going to be losing out on in the hope that you are gaining later? And ask yourself the question, what if I don't ever gain because of the sacrifice? Am I going to regret it? And last but not least, did I enjoy the learning process? Was the process of me learning something that I found fun? And because of this, did I then take away a life lesson? Is it something that I can actually use as a human later on in life, personally, professionally, in different kind of avenues and aspects in my life? If the answer is no and you didn't really gain much, you didn't enjoy the learning, you didn't enjoy your time there, you're definitely going to regret it in the future. If you think, actually, you know what, I can make the most of this time, I can learn, I can build on myself as a person, then you'll most likely enjoy it, and as a result, hopefully you'll have a great time and you won't regret it. These questions are just meant to be a bit of a guide and reflection that you can do whilst you're in a difficult time, but also whilst you are maybe you haven't even begun your program yet, and you might be thinking, do I really want to do this? Something that I actually want to do for the right reasons? And if it isn't, then it's something to maybe consider not pursuing, so you don't regret it in the future. And PhD will always be there. If you decide in the future it's the right time for you, you can always go ahead and pursue it. It will always be there. Let me know your thoughts if you're someone that did a PhD or is thinking about dropping out or finding it really difficult. Let me know if these are some questions that you are using to help guide your decisions in the future, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.